When you think of the term slavery, you may think of the Civil War. You may think that it is a part of our history, but it is also a current event. Human trafficking is a real form of modern slavery, and it is a lot more prevalent to our society than we think. Human trafficking is the involuntary servitude of forced labor, domestic servitude, and sex trafficking. The International Labor Organization estimates that there are 20.9 million victims of human trafficking globally. Slavery is all around us, and you could pass by a victim and not even know it. There are 3 major forms of human trafficking: sexual trafficking, forced labor, and domestic servitude. Each of these forms of human trafficking is just as serious and just as prevalent to society as slavery was back in the Civil War era. It is real and it is abundant. The most common form of human trafficking is sexual trafficking. Sexual trafficking is more abundant in border states such as California and Texas. The most common victims are women and children, and the internet has played a large part in helping the number of sex trafficking victims grow. Sexual trafficking is more abundant in border states such as California and Texas. According to the Center of Public Policy Studies, the Dallas-Fort Worth region accounts for 35% of the state's commercial sexual exploitation cases, even though that they only have 26% of the state's entire population. And in 2008, 38% of all calls to the National Trafficking Resource Center originated from Texas. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's efforts to combat crimes against children, California harbors 3 of the FBI's highest child sex trafficking areas in the nation: Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. The majority of these victims are women and children. According to the sex trafficking awareness organization Rescue Her, there are an estimated 2.5 million children, the majority of them girls, that are sexually exploited in the multi-billion-dollar commercial sex industry. The internet has played a large part in helping the number of sex trafficking victims grow. According to the American Bar Association, a testimony was presented to the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations at a hearing on human trafficking, mail-order bride abuses. Some entities in the mail-order bride industry have been linked to trafficking organizations that offer adults and girls as brides but sell them privately into sexual exploitation or domestic slavery. Sex trafficking is a very form of modern slavery, just as forced labor is. The second form of modern slavery is forced labor. Labor traffickers use different tactics such as false promises, violence, threats, or debt bondage. U.S. citizens and foreign nationals can be victims of labor trafficking, and labor trafficking occurs in various industries. Labor traffickers use different tactics to enslave their victims, such as false promises, violence, and debt bondage. U.S. citizens and foreign nationals can both be victims of labor trafficking. Since 2007, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline received reports of more than 4,000 labor trafficking cases in the United States. In a 2014 study, 71% of labor trafficking victims in the study entered the United States on lawful visas, meaning that they were not U.S. citizens. These victims paid an average of $6,150 in recruitment fees for jobs in the United States. Labor trafficking occurs in various types of industries. Globally, the International Labor Organization estimates that there are 14.2 million people trapped in forced labor industries that include agriculture, construction, domestic work, and manufacturing. This leads me to the last form of human trafficking, domestic servitude. Domestic servitude is an often overlooked form of human trafficking, although it is just as abundant as any other form of slavery. Domestic workers perform a range of tasks in private homes that include cooking, cleaning, laundry, taking care of children and elderly, and running errands. Some domestic workers also live in their employers' homes and are often considered on call to undertake work for their employer 24 hours per day. For some domestic workers, the circumstances and conditions of their work are forced labor, where employers have hidden them from leaving the home, withheld or not paid wages, used violence or threats of violence, and withheld their passports or identity documents, and limiting their ability to have contact with their family, and there are many victims of this form of slavery. The International Labor Organization estimates that 52.6 million men and women work as domestic workers across the world, as well as 7.4 million children below the ages of 15. There are many different reasons for how and why this form of slavery exists. The fact that this crime is mostly committed in a private household promotes the lack of legal protection and accountability for the victims. In many countries, domestic workers are not considered workers, but rather as informal help. These are excluded from national labor regulations. Often they do not enjoy the same protections as other members of the workforce, such as minimum pay, Social Security, and maternity benefits. This is mostly found in countries that have little to no labor laws. While domestic servitude is often overlooked, it is a serious crime, just as sex trafficking and forced labor. In conclusion, human trafficking is a very real form of modern slavery. A mother of a survivor of human trafficking said, "The fact that human trafficking is happening right here, right now in the United States, probably in any city where anybody lives. Just because you don't know anything about it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It can take shape in sex trafficking, forced labor, or domestic servitude, and all of these forms of slavery that violate the 13th Amendment, even in 2016.